When I wake, you 24. For my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, this a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kid, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war. Let's tell the squad to squad up. Let's uplift and lift God up. He laid down his life and got up. Rather we wins and lose, they not us. Can't tie us down or hold us back. Bible blicky, we holy strap. It's a war and we on attack. On point like we on a. Look, he filling the brakes when I'm feeling so blank. When I sit and I think and I drain on my thoughts like I swim in a tank. And God's on me and I'm pulling my rank. Don't tell me I can't. Like a man with a tank, bro, I'm ready for the war. Don't stepping like Morse code. One day he gon' come knock at the door, so better get hit like a torso. When I wake, you 24. For my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, this a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kid, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
Yeah, it's a war. Gotta cut the tie, you feel a pull. Bible say to flee, let's keep it dead. Elevator, don't work, take a set. Gotta watch the world and do the most. I'm just as radical in my approach. You can ask the kids who checking phones. Nah, don't unlock it, what's the code? I was once timid, now I'm bold. Bought my father business, I don't troll. Time to spread the G, I'm on go. Let her pour it back and watch him grow. In the blood, I'm covered head to toe. Sacrifices made to save a soul. Trying to pack the kingdom, that's the goal. Down and be the lamb, not the goat.
When I wake, you 24. For my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, this a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kid, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
Fighting with a masquerade, war. The devil I eradicate. I'm a soldier for the Lord above. And for him, I'm a basket. It's not the show, I got the sword on me. Time to lock and load up on the whole army. That's squad control, we about to shift gears. Bring the Lord near, no more fear. War. And with a Bible verse, I could replace a curse and make a demon hurt. They gon' need a hearse, and I'ma need a shovel to put him in the dirt. And that's the way it works. War. Meeting with the Lord, that's one day. Gotta read more than Sunday. Rather be a victim of the faith than the face of disgrace. I'll be making a mistake.
When I wake, you 24. For my ankles hit the floor. Take a break, say thank you, Lord. Then I dip up out the door. Don't lack it, I can't afford. Built tough like a Ford. Pack the word like a sword. This a battle, this a war. For your mind, it's a war. For your time, it's a war. For your money, it's a war. This ain't funny, it's a war. For the kid, it's a war. For how you live, it's a war. For your focus, it's a war. We ain't joking, it's a war.
We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war. We're at war.
Welcome to the Unapologetic Apologists. My name is Stelman Smith Jr., and today I'm going to be debating a very special guest. Before I bring him on, as always, if you have Rumble, follow Stelman Smith Jr. on Rumble. The show we will have an extended version after the debate. Where we'll be more just chatting about different ideas, things that are on our minds. Real quick, I want to introduce my co-host, CJ. How you doing?
Doing good. It's good to be back.
Great. And so to keep things fair, he will be muted for most of the debate. I wouldn't want it to be a pile-on.
Y'all don't want me to hear me talking.
Yeah, but so we're going to be debating morality and God, and we're going to just be pursuing points. I'm going to cross-examine my guest a little bit. He'll cross-examine me back, trying to get out of each other what we think is the main points. But before I go any further, allow me to introduce my guest. He is the fallen atheist, Richard Fellows. Richard, how you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing great. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, you as well. You actually, we had discussed having you on the show, and then you actually just made a video about morality. Actually, I need to link that in the description so people can see it. And
thank you.
It's honestly a topic I had gotten bored with for a while for reasons I'll get into in a minute. But you sparked my interest again.
Excellent.
How come you like the topic so much?
I have a lot of experience with it. As you know, I started off as Christian, and I first heard about the moral argument as a Christian. So that would have been 1987. And it was a book by J.P. Moreland called Scaling the Secular City. And then as a Christian, I was thinking, I saw the moral argument back then. I would have been about 17. I was thinking it was more like another tool in my toolbox. So I didn't really pay attention to it, but I just liked it. I was like, hey, it's another thing I can use. But then after I walked away from Christianity, a long story short, there had been a terrorist attack in the early 90s. And I went to a college debate and I watched this imam just mop the floor with an atheist. This would have been around 1993. And this was in a college in Fairfax, Virginia. And after the terrorist attack, this professor had said, we need to get rid of religion. And he agreed to debate this imam. And the imam used the moral argument, just mopped the floor with him. And he was like, yeah, you're right. That is, it's horrible. I can't believe it. But by the way, we have a standard. What's your standard? And the atheist was ready for the imam to try and defend scripture, or, he was trying to get into the Quran, but the imam never got into it. He was just all moral argument the whole time. And it really hit me. And I was thinking, wow, maybe there's more to this than I had thought, because I had walked away, but this was making me reconsider. I had a mentor who was an older boss who was kind of a mentor. He was a Christian, and he told me a lot about the moral argument. So early 90s or something, he really got me really focused into the moral argument. So I learned a lot about it. I never returned to theism because of it, but I learned a lot about it. And then as I got into terrorism, because I work in counterterrorism, as I got into that field and saw how a lot of the bad guys use the moral argument also to kind of bring people into their way of thinking, I decided I'm going to learn about how the brain works as much as I can. So most of my post-grad work was in cognition and how people become radicalized. So things like that. I sort of became a specialist in how people became radicalized, and morality is the key to all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool. So actually, to get into debate again, just one more header, I guess. I'll kind of outline my position and where I'm coming from. Then I'll give you the opportunity to do the same.
Okay.
But first of all, before we get into this debate, what's with all those books behind you? Are you trying to intimidate me with your intellect?
Yes. I want to look cool. I went to Podcast 101 and said, how do I look cool? And they said, get a bunch of books. And so I did. One day I might read them. I don't know. But,
Eventually.
In reality, in my postgrad, a lot of this stuff is going to be biology, sociology, anthropology, some apologetics books over here. Because another thing about me is I've probably gone to church more often than a lot of Christians. Because one of my gigs is to go out and hang out with Christians and kind of speak to how we can treat each other more calmly and more respectfully. And from that, I've met so many of famous apologists and had them sign my book, and I've become friends with a lot of these famous apologists just because of my work. So some of these books belong to you guys. But
That's
but
really
a
how
lot
it
of,
should be.
yeah, a lot of them are sociology, biology, things like that.
Yeah, it's actually funny. That's how you and I had met on Facebook prior, but the first time we met in person was an apologetics conference. Eric Hernandez was there, Tim Stratton, Jonathan Pritchett, Braxton Hunter. And it's funny, it's like all of us and we're all hanging out together and having a good time. And then you actually make a lot of atheist enemies online, funny enough.
Yes, I do, because I hang out with you guys, and a lot of the atheists say, hey, you can't talk to them. They're the enemy, they're destroying the country. And I'm like, hey, I don't think you're gonna make any points if you do that. So you're right. A lot of atheists don't like my approach.
Yeah, we'll get you over fully on our side eventually. Tonight, maybe. So yeah, we'll go ahead and I'll mute CJ, and
Thank God.
Yeah. And so I'll just kind of outline my position here. So one of the reasons I became kind of bored, if people are familiar with debates about the moral argument, they're probably familiar with William Lane Craig's version. And I thought those debates, they're a public service. I think they can be edifying, but largely I felt like people just ended up talking past each other because certain things are not properly defined. So one thing is the distinction between objective morality and subjective morality. I get what's usually meant by that, but I actually think it's sloppy. I don't think objective morality and subjective morality are mutually exclusive, right? Because morality can be objective and we still experience it as subjects.
Right.
So there's an issue. So to me, the real distinction needs to be made between, let's say, relativism or pluralism, right? Whereas relativism would be actually saying that there is no moral realm. Morality, it's not only is it not objective, it doesn't actually exist. It's just a feature of an advanced, evolved species that we perceive these things. We think they're moral. We create systems and societies, but it really just doesn't actually exist. It really is a matter of opinion or preference. Whereas something like pluralism would be, no, there is an objective morality, but there might be different ways it's expressed or experienced by subjects, right? And so often when people are calling morality subjective, I feel like they're often equivocating between those two. On the one hand, they'll say it's subjective, atheists will do this, and what they are meaning in a formal sense is that it's relative, but then they'll smuggle in pluralism where they'll bring in like moral debates and moral dilemmas, and well, even though we disagree, that doesn't mean there's not an actual right that we're getting at, and smuggle in things like, well, this is better for society, or that's better for society, or that's worse for society, and then they're smuggling in a moral law. So they're actually talking about pluralism, but using like a relative definition. So hopefully those definitions are clear and helpful. And then the last clarification I'll make is where I think some confusion can happen is if someone utters this statement, morality is real, that's actually not as clear as I think people think it is. So what I would mean, what I hold to is that there is a moral realm. That's a statement I prefer over something like moral realism or objective moralities. I just want to say there is a moral realm. And then because I'm not using the word objective, I don't get bogged down in debates about moral dilemmas, and which is definitely the right answer, right? I just want to say there is a moral realm that we perceive, that we can get to at through our senses, that we can understand. Versus what could be meant by morality is real. Somebody could just mean if they're more on the secular side, is that, well, there's just this group of behaviors and there's these societal conditions we put together, and then we're just taking the label of morality and putting on that. Now, from my stance, if you're a materialist, is that really isn't any different from your preferences, but we're just using the label morality for this set of preferences over other sets of preferences, which we don't have the same kind of care or understanding for. So again, I'm going to just lean in to say, no, there either is a moral realm or there isn't. Hopefully that's clear. Obviously, we'll get more into that, but now I would like to turn it over to you to kind of outline your position on it.
Okay. If, like you said, you're gonna link my video, which is like 5 minutes long, for how I see morality. There's another video for people who go to The Fallen Atheist on YouTube. The video right before that, which is a little bit longer, I make 5 points about why I had left Christianity, and the fifth point, I want to start with that, which is I see all of the world, I see reality as like a battle of moral frameworks. So we all, across the world right now, there's 8 billion of us, there's different moral frameworks that I see kind of hovering above us. And a good analogy for that would be the way that songbirds, like a community of songbirds, they have this song that they all sing. And the funny thing is that when if a baby songbird is born this morning, that song is already out there waiting for him. And it's like this metaphysical it's not really, I can't reach up into the air above the songbirds and pull down the song and show it to you, but this is a very real thing. It's the song that community sings. That song is waiting on that little bird to grow up and start embracing that song. And he's even got some biology, some posturing to him that says, I'm going to sing the song at some point. Even though when he's born, he's like, all I care about is where's my mom and why is it cold? But at some point in his life, he is going to start singing that song. I think morality is like that for us. So it's these frameworks that hover above us. I call them like cultural songs or cultural frameworks. The two biggest platforms on these frameworks is morality and intellectual. So a moral platform and intellectual platform. And when you do this long enough, that moral platform and intellectual platform kind of merge together. So much so that if something seems wrong to you, it almost also seems morally wrong. So all that kind of comes together. And I say that we see these as sacred. I use the word sacred. And then a lot of atheists get mad and they'll say, no, nothing's sacred to me. And I'll say, okay, if you don't want to say sacred, then use the word unassailable or inviolable. There's some things in this cultural framework that we're like, hey, don't mess with this, don't joke around. And it's immediate. If we're doing some analysis or we're trying to do some analysis, we end up, some things just hit us. We're like, oh my God, that's wrong. And you can literally just kind of recoil and say, oh my gosh, that's wrong. And you don't do any analysis for that. And I think that's because you've picked up these cultural norms as you grew up, and that songs become part of you so much that that unconscious signal that something is wrong is automatic. It's unconscious. It goes directly to your brain. So you think to yourself, this just came to me. I didn't start thinking about it. It just came to me. And so from that, I think people think, okay, this came from a beyond, and this is something that's meant for me to understand. And then they just assume that everyone else has that too. I think it's just biological, just sociological, but we don't perceive it that way. We perceive it as objective. We perceive it as something up in the air that's real, except we're applying an agent to it. We're saying an agent sending us to this. But I think it's like the songbird song. It's something that emerged from us, and it's something that we share and embrace collectively. And so in that sense, there is a moral realm. It does absolutely own us. And so I think the reason why these conversations often go in circles is because the atheists don't appreciate that. And they try to say, well, this is just a rational thing we do. We just decide whether we want well-being or not. And once we decide well-being, then there's your morality. I don't think it's that rational. I think it's very immediate, and it kind of happens non-consciously. So I think, yeah, there is a moral realm. I think it is just from us. It's just probably not a moral realm that comes from an agent or like a higher being.
Yeah. So something you said there, and this is kind of where I want to press you, because excuse me, even in your video, you seem to argue that our beliefs about morality are not mere preferences, and you can kind of point out a distinction based on the way that we react. But kind of the example you give of the songbird is like, and that's kind of like the more moral structure that we kind of have in our society, is that's not a moral realm in the way that I would define it, right? That would just be a cultural norm that, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, we're kind of putting the label of morality on it, but it wouldn't be anything more objective than other cultural norms that might be based on more mundane preferences. So what would be your position there?
I think what happens is that we non-consciously pick up on things. So like we're kids and we're growing up, and your parents are talking at the table, and one of them says, oh, we just heard from the Jenkins and they didn't like that TV show that we like. And the mom and dad are like, huh, okay. Next time we have them over, we'll talk to them about it and we'll have a great conversation. However, you hear that the Jenkins table are communists, and they're like, oh my God, they're just like, they recoil. And I think we pick up on that. I think we say, okay, even before we even understand, we're 4 years old. We're like, hold on, that's different. This happens in the back of our mind. So the difference is, do you get riled up? Do you suddenly go like, no, I got to get involved in this? If it's preferences or opinions, you're like, that's intriguing. That's interesting. But when it's moral, you're like, no, this is not just wrong. This requires correction. I need to let people know that I absolutely stand on this side of this, whereas they stand on that side of it. I want everyone to know that I'm over here. That's morality. And I think it's still our epistemology, but it's our epistemology that's so powerful that we interpret it as ontology, which it might be.
Okay, so,
by the way, it might actually be an ontological truth that a portion of the world gets right. But my take is that it's probably just our mind working as best as it can. It's just more like a non-conscious algorithm rather than a conscious algorithm.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I want to press you is because I think there's an issue with the kind of ambiguity there, only because I don't think we can affirm or we can extrapolate purely from a materialist worldview that because we perceive these sets of preferences one way and these sets of preferences another way, that therefore we can connect us in a materialistic worldview to actually make this a new like metaphysical category. And so a couple examples I had, because as you just articulated and you did in your video as well, there's some preferences like a flavor of ice cream where if someone differs from you, it's like, okay, cool. right? Whereas if there's a moral violation, a difference in preferences there's a harder reaction. But I don't think merely pointing to different reactions can actually be a justification for distinction in category. Because I think there are obvious examples you can give, but I also think there are other examples where it's not so clear. So if someone, you point to, it's not necessarily an objective thing if we're intrigued. Well, if someone believes 2 + 2 = 5, I might just be intrigued. I'm not going to be outraged by it, but that's still an objective category. It's not merely a preference because I'm intrigued. There's also things that are preferences like ice cream, like, for example, some people like playing paintball, other people don't. Because some people don't mind the sting of the paintball. Other people, they kind of relish in it, right? It's like, oh, this is great. It gets me alive. It gets me going. But if someone had the preference to not be shot by a paintball and then someone showed up and shot them with a paintball unwanted, they'd be outraged, right? And yet that is just a preference. I don't think we're justifying creating a new kind of category for it. And so, like, again, on materialism, the preference not to be stabbed is just a preference. But you're still going to be outraged if someone violates it because it harms you in a way where, let's say, disagreeing on your favorite flavor of ice cream doesn't. And you can understand, because the reaction to pain is more universal, that certain norms or preferences will become more normalized. But I don't think we're justified from the materialist perspective of creating a new metaphysical category just because our reaction to certain preferences are stronger than others.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And plus, what if 2 billion people got outraged that you don't put kittens in a microwave? They're like, what? You don't put kittens in a microwave? I'm outraged. And there's 2 billion people. And then a year later, suddenly 4 billion people are outraged. Now they're like, I get it. This should be happening. And then a year later, 8 billion people. And like, you and I are the last 2 people in the world that we're like, no, we're not doing that. And everyone's like, what? You're not doing that. And they're outraged. That's not going to make it. It's not like you and I are going to be like, okay, maybe we should start doing that. So it's not like our reactions really actually make it objective. However, for some reason, we're just going to live in a world where 8 billion people perceive it as objectively moral. And I would argue to you, I would say, hey, for the rest of our lives, we're going to have to be watching out for cats because they're going to do it. It's absolutely wrong. And for some reason, you and I are the last 2 people who say that it's absolutely wrong. Maybe there's a God who mandates that we should be doing that. But you and I are probably going to be like, no, we're going to protect cats as best as we can. I'm not even a cat person, but I would run into a house if I heard that they were doing that to cats. We have a dog, which you might hear barking, especially if she hears me talking about cats. But I don't think that our reactions actually make it, but I think it's how we perceive it. And I would say the paintball would be moral because the person is thinking nobody should be hurting me. And if somebody pops out and hits them and it hurts, they're like, no, that was a violation. They didn't come out and say, I happen to like Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Oh, okay, cool. No, they came out and shot you with a paint gun, and you're like, what? No, you can't do that. So for them, that is a moral issue, to be shot when you don't want to be shot. That's not a preference to me. And I think most people who get shot when they don't want to be, they'll say, no, that was a moral violation.
I agree, but I don't think what I'm saying is it's not justified to go from that much stronger reaction to affirming that there actually is objective morality or a moral realm if you're a materialist.
Oh, and I'm not. My thing with materialism is we might not know a fraction of the way the natural world is. We have a lot. We've learned a lot. I've seen atheists hold up, Sean Carroll's particle charts, all the particles, and then he holds up all the forces of nature. And I've seen atheists go, please learn this. And then this answers all the questions. Well, it answers a lot of questions, but it doesn't answer all the questions. So I'm not the kind of person that says everything can be explained by those little cue cards. It could be, we know 3% of what the natural world has to offer. So I don't ever walk around saying, hey, you believers, you need to stop believing in deities and you need to start believing in the natural world. I'm like, hey, I don't know what the natural world has to offer. That's not, for me, that's not even interesting. So I don't push that the material needs to fall into the categories that we currently understand now.
Sure. So yeah, and I don't want to force materialism onto you if that's not your worldview. I'm sort of using it as a shorthand because it's usually convenient shorthand for atheism, because that is the position of a lot of atheists.
In
Perhaps
many
a better way of articulating it would be something more along the lines of the way Josh Rasmussen talks about it, which is you either have a mind at the foundation of reality, which we would typically call God, or non-mind. And so even on a non-mind hypothesis, you could say, well, maybe there's Platonic abstract objects, and you could still kind of justify the immaterial there. But the relevance here would be that, for me, any non-mind hypothesis is not going to have the resources for a moral realm, because morality is a property of persons, right? Animals aren't having these discussions. Like the birds, as you pointed out with the song, they're not growing up and starting to question, is this the right song? Should that, should we be singing a different song? Is a different song better? So that might be a better way to make the distinction. So I guess you're not saying you definitely affirm that there is a metaphysical category called a moral realm. Is that true?
I think that there is, but I think it comes from us.
So how would it be that from us we could somehow create something metaphysical, especially if we didn't always exist?
Well, okay, that's a good question. How about this? The very first time on earth that people began to sing a song, and they remembered the notes, and actually have lyrics. So for the first time, there's a song. There's no music. Maybe a sticks, as a sort of a rhythm, and then they start singing. Now there's lyrics. Now that song exists. I would call that a metaphysical realm. Is that not the right way to say it?
I don't know, and maybe I should look at the definition of metaphysical. I'm meaning like an objective ontological category, like say like mathematics. Like that's not something like we couldn't just invent our own version of mathematics and somehow create an actual metaphysical realm of new mathematics.
Okay, so we might have to come up with another word, because I like to use calculus sometimes also, because calculus always existed, and it took us a long time to figure it out. Only in the past few hundred years have we figured out that calculus was a real thing, and very, very smart people tried for thousands of years. There's some way to measure this very complex stuff, and they took a long time, but only the past few hundred years have we come up with calculus.
We can come up with our own formulas. Sorry to cut you off there, but like we can come up with our own formulas of how to describe things, but fundamentally we're discovering the realm of mathematics. We're not creating it or inventing it.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. But now the song, the very first song that the first people sang, they did create that.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, that song and calculus are the same thing, but I see what you mean, that calculus is still just part of calculus existed before us, because
it was a part of reality, regardless of our preferences about it.
Right, or even even how we felt about it. It's just the case that if a planet is moving, or a galaxy is moving, and there's all these twisted measurements, there's a way to measure that, and even though there was no people to measure it, there was still a way to measure it. Okay, so then I would have to think of some other kind of word, but it's something that exists, like a song exists, even though I can't pull it out of the air. It's something that really does exist. So I think primates had some form of morality. I think they still do. I think ants have some form of morality, still do. But our form of morality is much, much different, because we have a lot of different cultural songs kind of waiting for us. And you come up in life and you're sort of expected to live one, but you usually veer and change it a little bit. And then maybe when you're 20, you might embrace another one, or you might create one. Joseph Smith created one. And now 200 years later, now 20 million people embrace it. So I always say that. Go ahead.
No, I have some pushback to this. I do want to allow CJ, and I know we said we're going to mute him, but he just wants to make a brief point, if that's okay.
Okay.
No, I just want.
Can you hear him?
Can you hear him?
I could barely hear him.
Is that any better?
I can hear you now. Yep.
Perfect. No, I just want to double back since you guys were discussing just purely for the sake of keeping the argument on the same terms and definitions when you guys had spoken on the actual definition of metaphysics before you continue, just to keep everything intellectually honest. Merriam-Webster defines metaphysics as a division of philosophy that is concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being that often includes ontology, cosmology, and often epistemology.
Okay.
Just wanted to interject that just for the sake of making it easier for you guys while the terms and definitions are there.
Okay,
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And just for the purposes of this discussion, I think of things, and we can come up with another word. I don't know what word we use, but I think of things that we can create still existing, and we can pass those down. We can pass those down across generations. It's like Christianity is like that. You have these very original batch of Christians in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and it kind of hovered above them. And then I would say a different group spread that. You cannot argue this. A different group spread that out across the Roman Empire, and then future generations came, and now that Christian cloud is kind of orbiting around the whole world. Not really physically, but might as well be, because somebody in China, somebody in South Africa, and somebody in Alaska at opposite ends of the earth could be thinking about the same thing.
Yeah. So where I went off for the pushback is kind of in his definition of metaphysics when he's talking about studying the actual nature of reality. It's like, that's what I want to know is the moral realm an actual fundamental part of ontological reality? Because this is where I think some of the equivocation comes in sometimes, is when you're talking about morality in terms of, well, it's a system we create or a song we create. It's like, yeah, but that's no different than this country prefers this system of government. That's their cultural norm and the way that their people understand the moral workings within that cultural norm, versus this other country creates a different system of government. Ultimately, it's relative. You can't say that if there's not an ontological moral realm, or if God doesn't exist, that therefore one is objectively better than the other. So I guess more so what I'm trying to ask is not how is it that we can create systems of cultural norms that we might within that system, because the way we're raised and the way we're raised to maybe even recoil at certain things. But beyond that, can we correlate that to anything ontological that says, well, my reaction to this thing is correct, whereas someone's reaction to it is incorrect?
Yeah, now I know exactly what you mean. And here's my answer. And this is a brutal answer. In my worldview, the Nazis or ISIS could win. They could take over the whole world. And some of the best people in the world, people that you and I admire, could die out. And it could be that all of our descendants then fall under Nazism or ISIS and continue on for 1,000 years, and where no one ever even thinks Christianity could go so far away that no one in the future ever considers it. Now, Christianity can still be true. So Christianity is true, but 2,000 years from now, if we could leave Earth and come back in 2000 and interview everybody, nobody would know what the heck we were talking about. Now, it has nothing to do with the ontological case. Let's say Christianity is ontologically true. And I mentioned this in my that first video that I hope you can link to, because I want people to go and listen to my fifth point there. We're in a battle of cultural songs. So cultural, you and I probably aren't too different on a lot of what we think people ought to do and ought not to do. There's some things that we would argue about, some things we might differ on a lot. But for the most part, the way we take care of our families and the way we interact with our communities are very similar. And I'm like, there's different groups out there. And again, I've been working in counterterrorism for 31 years. There are different groups out there who want a much different reality. And we're in a battle. They're trying to get momentum and we're trying to get momentum. And in my mind, there's no judge. There's no judge watching this going, you know what, these guys are actually right and these guys are actually wrong. There's nothing's going to intervene. It's going to really come down to our momentum.
Well, right. So
momentum.
Yeah, just to interject, that's what I'm trying to drill down on, because I think if you say, well, Christianity could be true, well, that's not necessarily answering the question, because of course, if Christianity is true, then we can just say that even if the Nazis win World War II, they're still wrong. And then if we all follow those beliefs, we're still objectively wrong. Whereas what I want to get from you, which I think you just clarified, is that from your view, there really is no judge. So it really is. I mean, when we get back to, we might react differently to certain preferences. I might recoil because my preference is that Nazism doesn't win out. I might recoil at the hypothetical, but it doesn't. If there is no judge, if there is nobody saying it's actually right or wrong, then that really is just a preference. of mine. We can't actually say they're objectively wrong.
And I would quibble over the word preference only because of how we react to it. Because people would be like, no, it's real. But here's the thing: we're perceiving that these things are real. You and I perceive that these moral issues are real, and I'm saying that it might not be based on something actually outside of us. It could just be an inner-generated certainty. I don't like to say hallucination or delusion because it makes it sound like people are weak-minded. But a lot of what we perceive really is inner-generated imagery rather than exactly what's out there. So I think that's probably what's going on. And I always say, if there is a judge, if that judge is watching this, he's never going to get involved. So if Christianity is true, and if God is actually the author of what's right and wrong, he is not. I know Scripture says he is, but I'm like, you should live every day as if he is never going to step in, and the momentum of your cultural song is going to come down to the work that you put in. And if it is ontologically the case, I'm just saying, okay, if it is, great, he's never going to intervene. And it's going to come down to who's here or not.
Well, I mean, if you believe in the end times, yes. But even then, I don't think that's a dichotomy between you either have to let God intervene or I have to do something. If part of my Christian worldview is that I am called to do something about it. Like that, that is the means by which God often changes is through us. So I don't think that those are actually separate ideas of God intervening versus me doing something. I think often the way God intervenes is through his commands that I do something or that you do something.
Yeah, if you're doing something through God and that's how he intervenes, great. It's like when I was in the Marines, if I've got 20 people working for me and I'm like, we're going to take this hill. And 10 of them are like, well, I'm going to take the hill because God is having me do it. And then the other 10 are like, well, we're just going to take the hill. I'm like, all 20 of you follow me. I don't care what you tell yourself. We're taking this hill. That's how I'm approaching this. If you're intervening because God's telling you, hey, maybe God is telling you, but I'm saying, hey, we're in this battle. We're going this way. We're going to do this. Not that I necessarily have to be in the lead, but this is something we're either going to do or we're not. And it's going to come down to existence. And that's why I say in one of these videos, I say the real foundation is whether or not you exist or not. Again, it has nothing to do with whether you're true. It could be false. The false worldview. Let's say there is an ontologically true worldview. An ontologically false worldview can still dominate the planet. And I'm saying that's what we have to try to avoid. Whether it's true or false, it's going to come down to our momentum.
Do we have an objective ought to not follow it?
I think so. But again, remember,
okay, good. So that's a good transition because this is where I kind of want to press you next.
Okay.
And by the way, just real quick, the reason I was using the word preference was not to be like emotionally loaded or insulting, but because I actually do think it brings clarity, right? The atheists I understand could interpret it as insulting, as me calling their moral beliefs preferences, but I think it brings clarity over the ambiguity of, well, it's more than a preference. In other words, are you talking about an actual ontological category? Or if it's not, then it really is preferences, even if those preferences seem so much stronger to us. But, okay, so from your view, you do think there is an ought. Here's kind of my question is, if there is no, let's say, authority outside of humanity, who defines what's right and wrong?
Well, I think we do. And not only do we do it, our collective action is what keeps it going. And if we stop doing it, then that ought goes away. It fades away, just like the songbird song fades away. And then it's gone. It could have been true.
Who is we?
People. I think people create this ought about what we ought and ought not to do. Now, there's different oughts. There's terrorists who say we ought to do something that you and I would find atrocious. They've created their ought. You and I have, we've embraced. We can't say we've created it. We're not the first people in 300,000 years of human existence. You and I aren't the first people who say we can't slaughter, an innocent village. But there have been times in human history where people have said we ought to do that, and they feel like they ought to do it, and they perceive it as an ontological mandate to wipe out a village. And I'm like, hey, reality is heartless. If we go and we wipe out that village, they're gone. And if somebody comes and wipes out our village, we're gone. And reality does not care. Now we're perceiving ontological mandates over preferences as we're doing it, and that's wonderful. But reality is like, I don't care what you call it, you're not here anymore, or you are here. That's the real. If I'm right, that's the real foundation, is whether or not you're still here.
Well, then that's what I was going to ask you, right? Because it's like, so you say we define it, and then who's we? Well, it's people. Okay, so if exactly half of humanity agrees with your moral view, and then the other exact half of humanity agrees with the moral view of the people who you fight against, then the question is, who determines who's right? You would say it's not a who determines that's right. It's literally just who's remaining.
It's a war, just like that song that you play on your at the beginning, the intro for your song. At that point, it's war. And hey, that's my fifth point. My fifth point is we are in a battle of cultural songs, and it's going to be a battle for existence. And there's some great moral systems out there that I'm really inspired by. But if people stop endorsing them and embracing them, then they're gone. And if people embrace and endorse moral systems that I find repulsive or sad, and they dominate and take over, then they win. And reality does not care. We can all disappear. Reality is like, hey, what can I tell you? There used to be some people. Now there's not any people.
Well, again, if we define it, and the majority defines it, and then who wins defines it. Suppose the people who are the kind of people that you fight against in your line of work, right? They win.
Yep.
Right. And then say they dominate the world, that's their moral belief. And then let's say you somehow were born into that world, and somehow, for whatever reason, you as an isolated individual come up with the moral views that you currently have. Right. Do you think you have a moral objective to fight against them, or to just follow along with them?
I would. If I'm somehow, miraculously, I'm born into that world now, and I think like I do, and I'm like, hey, this is wrong. I think Jesus actually, historically, Jesus was actually born into a situation exactly like that. And he was like, hey, this is all wrong. The Romans are doing this wrong. The Jewish authorities are doing this wrong. The Jewish people are doing this wrong. I don't like the way they're talking about Samaritans. I'm gonna knock some sense into these people. And he convinced about 3,000 people, maybe more, to see things his way. So I think that actually happens in history. And it's a battle of moral systems. So Jesus had this way of seeing things. He was surrounded by people who are like, you dumbass. And he was like, no, I'm gonna keep going, bro. And he did. And even after, I think he died, and I think he stayed gone. But even with that momentum that he built kept going. And to this day, it's still a thing that's still hovering over us. So yeah, I would try to do it as best as I could. Maybe I'd get killed the next day. Maybe I'd convince 3 people, and they convinced 1,000 people, and maybe that moral system would have a chance. But it's either going to exist or it's not. And then I'm like, hey, everybody, you have your beliefs, right? Are you either going to put your whole life into these moral beliefs, or are you just going to be like, well, I just kind of hope? And if you're the kind of person who puts your whole life into it, and you have people working with you, then that moral song is more likely to endure, which is exactly what happened with Jesus. At some point, he could have been like, nah, man, forget it. And then we would not be talking about Christianity, but he didn't. He was like, no, I'm going to keep going. So I think the effort that we put in has everything to do with whether the moral system exists. And then when it doesn't exist, it's because not enough people embraced it and endorsed it.
Yeah. Sorry. Could you hear that? No, you shouldn't be okay. So yeah. Well, so then here's my question though. If you believe in that situation, because right, we got through it. Who defines what's right and wrong? We do. Okay. From who's we? Humanity. Okay.
Yeah.
But then if humanity disagrees, what's going to come down to is who wins. That defines right and wrong. But now you're saying, well, but if you as an individual, if you had an ought to fight against it based on what you believed, how do you avoid the conclusion from that from your worldview that you, Richard Suttles, are the moral authority?
Well, this is why I say morality is different than preferences, because when people perceive morality, they're like, I don't care, I'm going to do it. So morality is all about action. And these moral systems are all about action. You either do the things that you do to keep the moral system in place, or you don't. And if you don't do it, it goes away. And if you do it, then it has a chance. So morality,
not necessarily. I mean, as ridiculous as this hypothetical might sound, you can imagine a scenario where someone has a preference for chocolate ice cream, and so they somehow want to influence through law that chocolate ice cream is the dominant flavor, and it's purely just because they want to see more of it in stores because they want to hoard it. Like, it might be a silly thing, but that doesn't make it any more than a preference just because they're trying to do something about it.
Well, I agree that happens too. There's all kinds of people who say, hey, I want this preference. I want things to be more like this. Organizations, companies, corporations, they do that all the time. They're like, hey, when people talk about headaches, I don't want them to talk about Bayer. I want them to talk about Tylenol. And they literally force that to happen with money and institutions. So that does happen too. It's not like morality is the only way that we can make our cloud of information more dominant than the others. Same exact thing for language. If someone creates a new language tomorrow that's never existed, but other people like it, and then more people speak it, and then more people, and then 1,000 years later, 7 billion people speak it, it won. It just dominated. And I'm saying morality is exactly like that. Our moral frameworks are exactly like language. We push it until it no longer exists.
But it's just your preference to push your view, right?
You know, the thing is, if people say, hey, it's just a preference, again, just like Jesus is talking about the Good Samaritan, and people are like, oh, he's saying his preference is to also be nice to the Samaritans. He would be like, okay, say the word preference if you want, but no, I actually mean this. I actually think we should treat Samaritans as equal to us. And if they behave
I'm
better
talking
than us-
about I'm talking about what it is, not what you mean by it or how strongly you feel in favor of it. I'm talking about what it is.
I get that. We're thinking, what's the actual ontological truth of what we're saying? And what I'm saying is that that's going to be overwhelmed by what we do. So that you can be ontologically correct, but if I outcompete you and what you're saying goes away, then I win, even if I'm wrong.
Okay, but so what you're doing in the situation, again, where you're the only individual who believes like you do, what you're doing is fighting to push it, and then you want ideally to win and have everybody adopt it. How is it not the case that in that world, you, Richard Suttles, are the moral authority defining what's right and wrong?
Well, I might not be, but I'm going to act as if I am. I'm gonna act like, no, I've got this figured out and I'm going to make this work. And then if I actually get it done, it'll be amazing. But at some point, if I really mean it and someone goes, hey, shut your mouth or I'm going to kill you, then I've got to decide right then, do I really mean it? And then I might say, no, I can't. I'm the kind of person that I can't stop, and then they kill me. Some people are like that. Some people are like, hey, some people say, hey, look, I don't want to fight this anymore. I just want to get by. And some people say, nah, man, I'm all in. I'm going to keep doing this. It's going to come down to what you do. So I agree. So I'm going to think that I have an ontological moral obligation from upon high to do it right. But I'm saying that could just be my hallucination.
But it's coming from you ultimately, because I know you'll do this thing where you'll say, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's a moral judge, right? But that's kind of like a way of backing out of like the implication of the question, right? Because the question is, from your view, there is no judge, right? You don't believe that judge exists. So right, we can both have the maybe I'm wrong discussion. But the question is, from your view, because you don't believe the moral judge exists, at the end of the day, it's coming from you, whether you believe that there's more to it or not.
Right. And this is what I meant by taking the hill. When I was in the Marines and I had to take a hill, and in Iraq, it was more like a building rather than a hill. But if I was in Iraq and I had to take a building, I took the building. And, I had people under me that helped me take it. But I'm either going to take that building or I'm not. And I could believe that I have a moral authority. I could believe that I'm wrong. The reality is going to come down to whether I take the building or not. And every moral system is going to come down to whether you still exist or not. And you can take it implications. You can say implications all you want, but it's either going to exist or it's not.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I kind of wanted to press, and I appreciate you being straightforward and honest about that, right? Because again, maybe I'm wrong discussions aside, right? When I watch a lot of these moral debates is, the atheist is always wanting to object to the Christian, the Bible's immoral or your God is immoral, this and that.
Right.
It's like, well, when you really press them to define it, the only authority they're appealing to say that is them. They'll try to play like maybe they can appeal to something else. And it's like, you're really just saying you as the immoral authority are judging the Bible as wrong. And I think, well, I'm fine. I disagree with you because then I just disagree.
Right. I completely agree. I agree with you on this because I argue with this with atheists too. I'm like, especially the atheists will say something's evil and then they'll say morality is just relative. And I'm like, okay, then why is that evil? And I get very few atheists who say, look, I don't like this, and I'm going to push for this to be considered evil. Just admit it, because I'm like that. There's verses in the Bible that I'm like, nope, I don't like the way this sounds. I don't want that ever to be preached as a good thing. And heck, I've got a lot of Christians who agree with me, who say, look, I can't explain why those verses are in the Bible like that. And if they are, they're not meant to be taken that way. And you're right, it's me versus people who say, no, this is wonderful. And admittedly, there's very few Christians who are like, yeah, I'm so glad these kids got hurt. We have different reasons as to why those verses are there. But I think it's a battle. I think it's a war, me versus them. And then someone can say, well, that's just you. And I'll say, okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. So, but good.
Atheists don't want to say it's not down to me. It really is something up there. And then I'm like, okay, if you think there's something up there, then you're you're kind of agreeing with them that there's something out there.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that, because again, even if we define it as a battle, there still is a further question of, well, is there a right winner and a wrong winner? And it sounds like if you're saying, well, it's just who wins, there's not a metaphysical objective way we can say there is a right winner or a wrong winner. Now, real quickly, I want to give you the chance to cross-examine me, and I just realized how long we've been going, but I just have real quick, hopefully these will be quicker, 2 more points I want to make. So I'm going to share my screen and bring this up real quick just so people can see. Playlist by, should be coming up. Yeah, here's a playlist by Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones, and it's Christianity in the West, how Christianity changed the world, how Christianity ended slavery, how Christianity saved children. And we kind of discussed this over text, and I think who would agree, grant this largely, correct?
Yeah, I would. A few years ago when Dominion came out, and then J. Warner Wallace's book, Person of Interest, I forget how much sooner or later J. Warner Wallace's book, Person of Interest, came out when Dominion came out. But for some reason, I read them both together in the same year. I think one of my apologist friends had me, might have been Josh Rasmussen, had me read them both together. And I agreed with that. There's a lot of values that a lot of other cultures didn't have, and the Christians did. And those, it's like I was saying, there's this battle of cultural values, and those values won out. So that today there's a whole bunch of people who use those values that 2,000 years ago, like we were just talking about the Odyssey. During the time of the Odyssey, these values were not in place. And now they are.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my question. Insofar as, you're talking about, ultimately, it really is just a war of ideas. There's not necessarily an objective right or wrong, but I believe in values. I, Richard, believe in values, and I want to push for my values. Would it be fair to say that largely you're banking on Christians, even if you might have certain moral disagreements with them on certain things? Would it be fair to say that you're banking on Christians to ultimately help and assist in pushing what you believe is right on the world?
100%. In fact, I always say Little House on the Prairie, which was one of my favorite shows when I was growing up. I always say you should try to be, especially when I'm talking to guys, because a lot of lost guys out there. I always say, try to be as much as Charles Ingalls as you can be. And people are like, you realize he was a Christian, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, not only that, try to live in the community as much like Walnut Grove. Try to make it as Walnut Grove as you possibly can, which are, Christian ideals. But again, I'm okay with that. So yeah, 100%. A lot of my friends are Christians. Here in Arizona, most of our friends are Mormons because we live in Mormon territory. So I actually interact with Mormons more than I do, day to day here in Arizona, more than I do with traditional Christians. But same thing, they're very Walnut Grove, Charles Ingalls type people. And I think that's the way to be. And if it takes Christianity, wonderful. At the same time, if it takes Mormons, they'll be it too. I actually think Mormons have a better network if things start to really fall apart. Even though Mormons are only like 20 million strong, I think they actually have a better network. I think they can hold tight better than, like, say, evangelism. It's all down to your networks.
Yeah, there's certain cultural things. There's certain cultural things involved in that I might not even necessarily consider moral, and that we have to have a discussion about that. But no, I do appreciate that concession because, again, in a lot of debates you see, it's always, the Bible's so immoral. We don't want Christians in government and this and that. And they'll quibble over like minor things like gay marriage or something that's not so minor like abortion. And I get where the disagreement comes there. But if we're looking at the big picture, right, things like the fact that slavery was ended, that children were viewed as, you can't just abuse them. Mike Jones gets way into that, how children were not seen as even human and were terribly abused in the ancient world. If we're talking, and the fact that even people, again, J. Warner Wallace or Tom Holland will talk about this, that even the way we view things like forgiveness, we take for granted that, of course, forgiveness is good, but that wasn't even seen as a virtue for most of history through most societies. And so I appreciate that you'll say it, because a lot of these other people will pretend like Christianity is only harmful. And it's like, actually, no, probably a lot of the views of what you think is the good, you actually kind of needed the Christians to build the West for you to even have those views. And if you give the power to non-Christians, I mean, we see where that happens, certainly in Islamic countries, and then even to degrees where the West has become secularized. We see declining birth rates and things like that. I don't think people actually realize the full repercussions if Christians aren't the ones pushing their values and dominating there. One last point I want to get and then I promise I'll give you all the power to cross-examine me as much as you'd like, press into me. You made a point in your video that you kind of said, like, maybe, and maybe it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but that, hey, even if objective morality does exist, it's not going to drop out of the sky. In other words, like, well, we're not going to know it even if it exists. And then I want to go, well, but if Christianity is true, we have the Bible. Like, and the Bible didn't drop out of the sky. Obviously, I don't have the view of the Bible as the Quran, right? I believe it was revealed over time, written by, genuine eyewitnesses and things like that. But it's like, actually, we have been given a guide, if my worldview is correct, on what is good and what is bad. What are your thoughts there?
I'm like, I made a post on this. I make these kind of posts a lot, and usually you jump in. I'm like, as long as I see millions of Christians not sharpening the stone, not lovingly, respectfully, sharpening stone over tertiary, not important issues, but millions of Christians calling other Christians heretics, and millions of Christians hating the Jesus of other millions of Christians. As long as I see that, then Christianity is not like calculus yet. It could be that Christianity is exactly like calculus, but so many people are taking a stab at it that we're not there yet. We haven't got the rule book for Christianity in the same way that we have the rule book for calculus. So in my view, that kind of makes me think Christianity is made up and is fractured hopelessly and forever, and the Bible is not going to do any difference. It's not going to make any difference on that. But if I'm wrong,
it did, though, based on your concession you just made. It made a huge difference in human history and ending slavery and all kinds of things.
Well, factions of it. It's like we talked about the Civil War before. That was Christian versus Christian. But fortunately, the Christians who were against slavery won, and had the Christians who were for slavery. I hope I said that right. The Christians who were against slavery won. Had the Christians who embraced slavery, had they won, we might still have slaves today. And then there will be other Christians going, some people just don't belong in the land of the free, and they really are property. The Bible says people are your property. That could be what's going on in podcasts in 2026 had what I consider the wrong side won.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a right comparison, because when we discuss this in text, I don't think it's comparable. The fact that you had Christians on both sides isn't surprising, because slavery was the norm for all of human history. It's not surprising that you would have Christians who also believed in slavery. That was the norm. But because it was the norm for all of societies and all of history, there's not a traceable element to that coming from the Bible. That's just what people believed. What we can trace came from the Bible was the Christians that changed course and said, actually, no, this thing that's normal to all of us isn't right, and we get this directly from Scripture. That's not the same thing.
And that's fine, but it did take them 1,800 years to do that. And here in the West, I'm just saying, hey, great, I'm glad it happened. But I would even give you like Jesus. The thing about the Good Samaritan, was one of my favorite things about original Christianity, was that there were just a lot of Jewish people who were like, I hate the story of the Good Samaritan because the Samaritan does good and the Jewish people do bad. And I hate that story. But there were probably some people who were like, no, look at what the Samaritan actually did. Drop the labels for a second. Look at what the Samaritan probably did. And he inspired people. So he was taking something that was completely hated everywhere, and he probably grabbed 3,000 people on this new idea, or at least this creative idea that wasn't popular. And I would say maybe the Christians who ended slavery were like that. It took a while, but they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's making my point for me, was that Christianity was the big cultural shift. It was the thing that changed it. And so I think that's what's fair to connect to Christianity, not the things that just everyone believed. And because everyone believed them, of course, some Christians are going to fall into the category of everybody. Right? I think Christianity doesn't.
I'll just say it's going to come down to a battle of who wins, however it happens. And if it wins,
and from your worldview, I agree.
Well, and if it comes down to something that's great and helpful, and we look back on it and we're like, hey, thank God that happened, then it was Christians who did it, then great, I'll give it to you. I'm like that.
But of course, what matters is it true? Because remember, the original point was, well, God didn't give us a rule book. And it's like, well, if Christianity is true, he literally did. And I know your point about, well, people disagree and they think that. We'll get into that on Rumble, because I have a hard disagree with you there. I don't think the Bible is that ambiguous. I think all it is a testament to people trying to manipulate it and use it for their strategies. I don't think that means that the Bible's actually not clear on those things. I think it's just what's clear is that people will manipulate it. Last point, because
I want to completely agree with what you just said. Let's say that the Bible really is like calculus. It's a list of actual, very, very clear rules. Most people don't get it. And okay, that's our fault. It's not the Bible's fault. It's still a battle of who wins. So all of these wrong people who don't get it, they're misusing the correct rule book, the ontological rule book. And I'm saying if they win, then the people who believe it correctly are going to disappear. And then of what use is it?
Well, this is a perfect transition. The last thing I say, and I promise the reins, I'm handing the reins over to you. The last thing I'll say is, again, you made the point in your video that when we talk about what if I'm wrong, right? You said, well, even if objective morality exists, if no one believes it, it's not really going to affect us and affect our lives in any way. Well, here's my counter. If objective morality exists and it's from the purview of my worldview, isn't hell going to affect people?
Right. That's another thing. A lot of cultures say, hey, I know that we're battling this other culture and they have some weapons and we have some weapons, but just so you know, when we all die, there's going to be this whole other set of rules where people who are with me are going to be happy and the people who aren't with me are going to be upset. That could be. It would be really surprising to me if there's a creator who loved us all for 300,000 years who would let us still be that confused about that. Because for me, that would be the most important aspect for everything. Not the Bible.
Who would let us have our free will? Again, I don't want to shift into the Rumble debate, but I mean that is the issue for me. Is when you say, well, he's letting us be confused. Again, it sounds like he's ambiguous and refusing to clear things up.
He is.
When in reality, it's like
if he exists, he's allowing confusion because confusion is observable. If let's say you and I are in charge of a company and we have 100,000 employees. If 20,000 think one thing and 20,000 think another, there's 5 groups of 20,000, 5 different views. Their confusion is observable. Even if you and I wrote a perfect rule book, their confusion is observable. And we can either deal with that or not.
Yeah, but I don't think that's analogous. I mean, you just said we wrote a perfect rule book. And if we continue to give clarifications and they continue to manipulate it for their own goods, and eventually we just go, well, you guys figure it out. At that point, it's not a complaint that we're not clearing up the confusion. It's a complaint that we're not taking away their free will.
That might actually be what God did. It could be that God's like, hey, I gave you guys the rule book. I don't know what to do anymore. Take care. That could actually be what he did.
Again, because we are supposed, again, going back to the fighting for our worldview, because God, the command in scripture is for us to be that arm of God in the world. The fact that you have people like Mike Winger who goes out there, and I'd love to use him for an example when we get to Rumble. You have the fact Mike Winger is God's hand in clearing up confusion, and that's our moral command. And God does take a step back because that's for the moral benefit of everybody. It's not the only way God does it, but it's a big way.
I'll agree with you on this. There is a battle between Christians who love Mike Winger and Christians who love Candace Owens and Christians who love, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Christians who love, I can't believe I'm going to say this. Christians who love Andrew Tate. I can't believe I just said that. There's a battle of Christians.
Let's say I'm going to say James and talk about your works though, and like, are you really a Christian? Like, that's not necessarily fair to.
But if they get together and they become effective and they outcompete the Mike Winger Christians, then they're going to be the ones people think about when Christianity.
But then you're again. So last thing I'll say, and then totally interrogate me how you see fit. I just see a flip-flopping there between the question I'm asking is if Christianity is true, and then and in answering it, you go back into your worldview. So it's not really answering the question. It's back to your worldview of, well, it's just the power struggle.
Well, it is. It's about, I'm saying it's a power struggle, even if Christianity is true. If I'm right, then it's just a power struggle. But if you're right and Christianity is true, it's still just a power struggle because the people who are
no, it's not just a power struggle because there are people on my side who, yeah, there is a power struggle going on, but some people in that power struggle are fighting for the objective good, and that has afterlife implications. And the people on the other side are fighting for objective evil, and that has afterlife implications.
Gentlemen, I'm going to interject for a moment. I just want to say that as the time is coming, we've already been an hour in due to the other parts, so we need to get into Rumble. I would suggest now that we pass the reins to
go ahead.
Him to cross-examine you, and we continue this on the Rumble side for those who still want to continue to watch.
And by the way, am I going to go into Rumble too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then how much time do I have for cross-examine?
As much as you need.
As much as you need.
Hours. I'm going to take hours. I'm just kidding.
Okay. I've been going for an hour if you include the introduction. So yeah, again, take your time. And I won't go to Rumble just yet because I want you to be able to share this with your viewers, Richard. So take as much time you need, and then depending on how late it gets, we can move into Rumble at some point. But for now, floor is yours.
I'm actually getting ready to wrap it up. I was going to say, I'll concede the point that if you're right, it's only a power struggle while we're alive. And then once we all die, then we are going to face the judge and he's going to go, you know what? It turns out these guys were right and these guys were wrong. So now it's time to face the consequences. But I will say this, if that's true, if you're right, Stelman, and we all face the afterlife, humanity's gone, there's no more life down here. All humans are standing in the afterworld life. We're all facing God, our judge. At that point, do you think we're all going to have clarity?
It depends what you mean by clarity. I think we're going to have it to some degree. I also think God allows certain theological debate in heaven.
Well, how about this?
That's going to be speculation.
Do you think some people are going to be living in bliss and some people are going to be dragged down to torment?
Are you just talking about, do I believe in heaven or hell?
Yeah. I mean, out of every person is going to experience one of those two things, right?
Yes.
And do you think that they'll all have clarity then as to whether they're either in bliss or in torment?
I think the people in bliss will have far more clarity. The people in torment will have some clarity, but largely not as much as we might think. Like, I think their conclusion might be something like, okay, I guess God did exist, but that jerk didn't. Like, I think they'll find ways to still continue to gaslight God. I don't think they're going to turn into be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
Do you think there'll be clarity between ow, and not ow?
Well, yeah.
Okay, I think so too. So I think it's possible for God to give us all clarity. You know, it might take torment or not. Okay.
But I also would say, well, I don't want to go on another point, because if this is your cross-examination to me, I don't want to answer something you're not asking.
Well, I'm only asking if we agree that there's going to be clarity in the afterlife, then I think we agree that God has the ability to give everyone clarity.
Of course, I believe that. I also believe he has the ability to take away free will.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here's one thing. I'll just do one thing for my cross-examine. If you have 12 kids and 3 believe one thing, let's just say you have 12 kids and 3 come home and say, hey, I just talked to Dad. He wants us to throw all the furniture out of the house. And then 3 other kids come and say, actually, Dad wants us to paint the whole house polka dot. And then 3 other kids came, no, Dad wants us to burn it down. So now that only leaves 3 left. And 3 are like, no, Dad wants us to continue marching as normal, taking care of each other, taking care of the house. But now 9 kids versus 3 kids are all saying, no, this is what Dad wants. So you're at work and your wife calls and says, hey, this is weird. 3 kids want this. Hey, I'm going to put you on speaker. Would you get on speaker and go, hey, kids, line up. Guess what? I got some news. Would you do that?
Yep.
Okay, I would too. That's it. That's my crossing zone.
And of course I would, right? I mean, and this gets into all kinds of things, like when atheists will say, well, you know, if you're a parent, yeah, you know, I won't get into those hypotheticals. I'll stick straight to the example you're giving. The difference, of course, is in a lot of these issues is, of course, I, as a human with limited knowledge and limited power, would do that, because I'm under certain moral obligations, and I don't have foresight and foreknowledge and wisdom to know what could come if I kept my hands off. It could be that if you were to somehow give me a crystal ball and show me 2 outcomes, one is I intervene and maybe I win in the short term, but like all it does is result in later conflicts and things. Whereas in the other side of the crystal ball, I refrain, I don't get on speakerphone, and there's now a debate that goes on among the kids, and the right ones convince the wrong ones. And through that, there's tremendous moral growth and character development that now gives them all wisdom to not continue making dumb decisions in the future about things. That might be the route I would choose. Now, I'm not at all claiming it's that simplistic in the way God does it, because there's more complications, but that's enough to illustrate that something as simple as having foreknowledge of different outcomes would change the way you might act in that situation.
Okay, and I'm happy. That's my cross-examine. We can go to Rumble.
Okay. Well, listen, yeah, no, I appreciate it. We'll continue on Rumble. Yeah, we'll bring CJ in. Listen, thank you everybody for watching. Let me check the comments real quick to see if there's anything. Oh, somebody does have a question that looks like it's for you. So let me bring this up. Are there preferences people have that can't be described as mere? Is oxygen a mere preference? I wonder if that's for you or for me.
Yes, I mean, for me, I would say no. Preferences would not apply to oxygen. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah, I think that might be for me, because I was talking about something more drastic being a mere preference. I'm I'm okay saying there are mere preference, or I'm okay with saying there are like softer preferences and harder preferences. Softer preferences being something I don't really care if people disagree. A harder preference meaning I really do care if people disagree. My point was to make just definitionally it's a preference. Sorry, I didn't bring CJ in here. He's and then say your piece, then we'll go to Rumble.
Just trying to keep me down. Just trying to keep me. Oh no, I was just immediately reading the comments. I do have a question for Richard though when we transfer over to Rumble.
Okay, yeah. So listen,
just more to discussion matter.
Last one to thank you everybody for joining me on YouTube. Go download the Rumble app, follow Stelman Smith Jr. to see the rest of this episode. And Richard, I can't thank you enough for coming on debating. We're gonna have you on more on the show. We were discussing before. I really appreciate it. For people who don't know, we've been friends for a couple of years now.
We've taken a road trip across Texas before.
Yeah. Exactly. So listen, I really appreciate you being here, and I hope you feel I've been fair. I know I took way more time cross-examining you. To be fair, you kind of cut off your time when, yeah.
That's what I wanted. I wanted us to do that, so I'm happy.
Okay. So again, thank you so much. People, go follow him at The Fallen Ape Theist, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Facebook, he has some great stuff, great content he puts out. And again, we'll link his video in the description so you can go to his YouTube channel. Until then, we are the Unapologetic Apologists, and we are going to say bye to YouTube.
Thanks for watching.